Have you ever stopped to wonder why, out of all the nations, empires, and peoples throughout history, there is one name that never seems to disappear from the headlines, from global debates, from conflicts that shape the world? Why is it that no one can truly challenge Israel? This question isn't about the wars of the 20th century or the modern political struggles we see today. The answer goes much deeper, thousands of years back, to a time before history was written as we know it. Long ago, in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, lived an ordinary man surrounded by a world of idols and false gods made of stone, clay, and gold. Amid the bustling city of Ur, one of the most advanced civilizations of its time, this man named Abram heard a voice, an extraordinary voice that would change the course of history forever. This was no ordinary call, it was the voice of God himself. In a world ruled by superstition and strange rituals, Abram's life was about to become the beginning of something greater than anything humanity had ever seen. This is the origin of a promise, a land, and a people that defy logic, challenge history, and baffle understanding to this very day. So why can no one move against Israel? To truly grasp this mystery, we must travel back to where it all began. Stay with me, because what comes next will change everything you think you know. Something extraordinary happened. Suddenly a voice echoed deep within the soul of a man. It wasn't a voice coming from the temples of pagan gods or from the priests of that ancient era. No, this was different. This was the voice of the Creator of heaven and earth itself, and it spoke clearly, with a promise that would change the course of history forever. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Genesis 12:1-3. From that moment forward, something supernatural was sealed into the very fabric of humanity's story. This wasn't just a personal promise to a man. It was the beginning of a divine plan, a plan to create a people marked by God's own presence, carrying his purpose and fulfilling an eternal covenant. In other words, God was saying, "Whoever touches you is touching the apple of my eye." God promised Abraham not only descendants, but also a specific land, a territory that to this day remains the epicenter of the world's greatest tensions. And here begins one of the greatest mysteries of all. Why is this small piece of land, so tiny geographically, so fiercely contested, so widely spoken of, so fiercely protected, and yet so frequently attacked? The answer lies in that divine promise. God said, "All the land you see I will give to you and your offspring forever." Genesis 13:15. Notice, he didn't say, "for a time," or "for a few centuries," or "until you disobey." No, he said, "forever." Spiritually and prophetically, that tiny piece of earth carries an eternal divine signature, an unbreakable mark placed by God himself. No empire, no king, no army has ever been able to erase that signature from history. Since God made this covenant, Israel has faced relentless persecution through millennia. Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, all of them tried in their own way to destroy this people, erase their story, or seize their land. But here's what few realize. Attacking Israel was never just about land or politics. It was, and still is, a spiritual battle. Every army that rose against Israel wasn't just fighting men. They were challenging the very God who made the promise. It's no coincidence that many of these empires vanished into the dust of history. Where are the Philistines today? The Amorites, the Hittites, the Canaanites? They've all faded away, lost in the sands of time. But Israel remains, small on the map, yet colossal in its existence. During this journey, Abraham, whom God later renamed to mean "father of many nations," faced countless trials. Yet with each obstacle, God reaffirmed his promise. In a powerful vision, God sealed the covenant in a way that could never be undone. This story isn't just history. It's a living testament to a promise that transcends time, a promise that still echoes today. Long ago, God asked Abraham to prepare a sacrifice, following the ancient customs of making a covenant. In those times, it was common for two parties to walk between animals that had been cut in half, symbolizing that both sides were equally responsible for upholding the promise they were making. But what happened next was unlike anything Abraham or anyone else could have expected. Instead of two parties, Abraham saw a fire, a blazing torch, and a smoking furnace pass alone between the pieces of the sacrificed animals. In that moment, God was making something crystal clear. This covenant doesn't depend on you, Abraham. It depends entirely on me. In other words, God was sealing a promise where he himself was the guarantor of every word. If you study the history of Israel, you'll quickly realize that this nation has not survived because it has the largest army, the most land, or even abundant natural resources. No, the protection Israel enjoys defies all military logic. It is supernatural. Take the War of Independence in 1948. Israel was a newborn state, barely established, and yet it was simultaneously attacked by 5 neighboring Arab countries: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. The world's experts predicted a quick end, saying Israel wouldn't last a week, but against all odds, Israel won. Then came the Six-Day War in 1967. Surrounded on all sides, Israel launched a swift and overwhelming campaign that left even its own generals stunned. How was it possible? The answer has been written for thousands of years, in the Torah, the Psalms, and the prophets. Psalm 124, 1-3 says it plainly, "If the Lord had not been on our side, the enemy would have swallowed us alive." Israel's survival isn't about military might. It's about a promise, an unbreakable promise that no empire, no government, no superpower can ever revoke. From the very beginning, God made this abundantly clear. "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse." Genesis 12:3. That has never changed. Even today, nations that rise against Israel often end up facing consequences they didn't expect. On the other hand, those who extend their hands in blessing, support, and friendship, whether they fully understand it or not, receive the blessing of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Israel is not just a country, it is God's prophetic clock ticking here on earth. Everything that happens there echoes in the spiritual realm, in prophecy, and in the unfolding of God's eternal plan for humanity. So when you ask why no one can move against Israel, the answer is clear and powerful. Because God said so. Because God placed his hand on that people and that land. Because anyone who dares to touch Israel is, in reality, challenging God himself. And those who rise against God are already defeated before the battle even begins. Looking at today's world, it's impossible to ignore the fact that many nations, empires, and organizations openly oppose Israel. They form alliances, plot strategies, set traps, finance attacks, and launch campaigns to weaken, isolate, or even destroy Israel on the global stage. But here's the big question that echoes quietly in the spiritual depths of humanity. Do these nations truly understand who they are fighting against? Do they grasp the spiritual, historical, and prophetic consequences of challenging something God declared eternal? What happens, or rather, what could happen, to those who dare to stand against Israel? The answer isn't found in politics or news headlines alone. The answer to what happens to those who oppose Israel isn't found in human guesses, political speeches, or even in negotiation tables. No, the true response is deeply engraved, sealed, and eternal. It's written in the sacred scriptures. From the earliest days, God made it crystal clear what would happen to those who choose to stand against his promise, his people, and his covenant. When God called Abraham, he declared a sentence that echoes through the centuries, just as powerful today as it was the moment it was spoken. "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse." Genesis 12:3. This isn't just a poetic phrase or a hopeful wish. It is a spiritual decree, an unchangeable, inviolable law set in stone by the Creator himself. God hasn't changed. His word hasn't changed. And what he declared still stands firm. Throughout history, nations that dared to challenge Israel were systematically brought down. Egypt, which once enslaved the Hebrews, was swallowed by the very sea it had opened to let Israel escape. The mighty Assyrian Empire that humiliated the northern kingdom vanished from history. Babylon, which took Judah captive, was conquered by the Medes and Persians. The Persian Empire, which sought to stop the rebuilding of Jerusalem, fell before the Greeks. The Greeks were crushed by the Romans, and the Romans who destroyed the temple no longer exist as an empire but remain only in the pages of history books. All those who touched Israel, directly or indirectly, experienced the invisible but unyielding judgment of the God of Israel. But what about today? And what about the times yet to come? The Bible is strikingly clear, precise, and chillingly detailed when it speaks about the future of those nations that rise against Israel. The prophet Zechariah delivers one of the most powerful oracles in all Scripture. He speaks of a specific time, a day still to come, when every nation on earth will gather against Jerusalem. And God's response is both direct and terrifying. On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who try to lift it will injure themselves severely, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it for battle. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights on the day of battle. Zechariah 12:3. This is not symbolic. This is not metaphor. This is God himself declaring war against any power that dares to lay a hand on Jerusalem, the land of promise and the people he chose. Whoever tries to lift this heavy stone that is Jerusalem will only harm themselves, will bring destruction upon themselves, will be crushed by their own attempt. The prophet Joel paints an equally stark picture for the nations that dare to mess with Israel. He says that God will gather all those nations into the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means the Lord judges, and there he will execute judgment because of what they did to his people. In those days and at that time I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will enter into judgment against them because of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they scattered among the nations and divided up my land. Joel 3:1-2. Notice something crucial here. God's judgment isn't only reserved for military attacks. He also judges those who try to divide the land, redraw borders, or impose agreements that violate the eternal covenant made with Abraham. That alone is enough to bring divine judgment upon a nation. To interfere with the division of the promised land already lights the flame of God's wrath. Imagine what else might happen beyond that. The conflict doesn't stop there. There's even more to this story. The prophet Ezekiel gives us a vivid and chilling vision of a future war, often called the Battle of Gog and Magog. According to Ezekiel, nations from the far north and other distant lands will come together with a single, terrifying goal: to destroy Israel. But what many don't realize is that the ending of this story is already written, and it's nothing short of dramatic. Ezekiel tells us that on the day when Gog comes against the land of Israel, God's wrath will rise like a blazing fire. The very earth will shake with a mighty earthquake, and here's the astonishing part: God will turn even the enemies against each other. Swords will be raised not just against Israel, but they will turn upon their own brothers and allies, causing confusion, division, and chaos among the invading forces. Natural disasters, internal conflicts, and destruction will sweep through those who dared to rise against Israel. This is no ordinary battle. It is divine intervention itself stepping into the battlefield. And the story doesn't end with Ezekiel. The book of Revelation brings the final curtain on this epic conflict. It reveals a time when all nations gather against Israel once more, only to be crushed in the legendary Battle of Armageddon. Jesus Christ will return as the powerful Word of God, riding a white horse with eyes blazing like fire and a sword that comes straight from his mouth. He will judge the nations with unwavering justice and tread the winepress of God's fierce wrath. This is not just a military defeat, it's a spiritual verdict of total destruction, ruin, and eternal judgment for those who oppose Israel. This is a battle against much more than a nation. It is a confrontation with the Creator of heaven and earth himself. And here's a sobering truth many overlook. It's not just entire countries that will face judgment, but also the individuals, the leaders, kings, presidents, generals, who choose to stand against the people marked by God's promise. God is always watching, never sleeping or forgetting. He takes note of every action, and when the time is right, he will execute his perfect judgment. So the question resounds with weight and awe. Who is foolish enough to challenge the God of Israel? Who dares to touch the apple of his eye and think they will escape unscathed? History has already shown us there are no winners on the other side of this battle. The only wise choice for any nation, for any people, is to stand with Israel, to recognize that an eternal promise has been made, an unbreakable covenant established, and that God never goes back on his word. Supporting Israel isn't just a political move, it's a profound spiritual decision, one that invites blessings, prosperity, protection, and favor from heaven. Because at the end of the day, the verdict remains unchanging. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. Genesis 12:3. This is the decree of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and those who dare defy this decree are already defeated, even before the battle begins.